Hi, this is John. Welcome to the weekly water outlook for July 6, 2014. Hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. Well, here's the precipitation over the last 7 days. Really, if you look at the entire nation, it was really pretty quiet. This was the only area here in Iowa and in northern Illinois that really had more of a widespread significant rainfall event. And then we had Hurricane Arthur, tropical storm, and then Hurricane Arthur that produced some heavy rain along the East Coast, very limited across the coastal sections of North Carolina, and then it pushed off to the north. That looks like anywhere from just generally 2 or 3 inches of rain, which is not all that heavy for a hurricane or tropical storm, but most of it did remain offshore. So here's the precipitation over the last 7 days. You can see it's been very dry in the west. Red is below normal precipitation. Blue is above normal precipitation. So most of the nation experienced a dry week. If you want to look at where soil moisture changed, brown is soil moisture that has decreased, and blue has increased. And this was before the hurricane moved up, so you can see you do not see the impacts of Hurricane Arthur. Temperatures over the last 7 days were generally cool. I mentioned in last week's briefing that the central part here with that area of the upper low aloft was going to bring in a pocket of cooler air, and it really was centered right here. And, I think this has given us some hint of what this summer is going to be like. My outlook for summer did call for cooler weather centered over the Midwest, and it looks like what it does is occasionally it sends out a cold front and it pushes it off to the east and even parts of the southeast U.S. You can see it sort of cooled off that green here in parts of northern Alabama and Mississippi. And I think that's sort of a hint at the story that we're going to see this summer is a core of cooler than normal weather over the upper Midwest and then sort of radiating out east and southeast. So if we look at stream flow across the nation, you can see a couple patterns here that clearly stand out. You can see the Midwest areas in blue and black in Iowa, and that's well above normal stream flow. That's a persistent pattern. You can trace back all the way into actually winter. And then if we look at the northeast U.S., that's due to Hurricane Arthur very recently. Matter of fact, taking a look at flooding, you can see that there is a reach of the Mississippi River along the Iowa-Illinois border and then all the way down towards just north of St. Louis that is either in major flood or forecast to go to major flood. And some of these actually are in the top 3 or 5 of all-time records. So this is a very significant flood event on that reach of the river. Now, the Missouri River, which was high, is not so contributing as much flow in here. So downstream, you do see some attenuation of flow. So it's mainly north of St. Louis. Speaking of the tropics earlier, here's the track of Hurricane Arthur, and you can take a look here, and you can see briefly it actually became a Category 2 hurricane, and then now it's weakened significantly. It's back down to a tropical storm, but it did produce some heavy rain. I showed you right along here the North Carolina coast and then the northeast U.S. Here's the rainfall, just sort of a close-up of the southeast U.S., North Carolina. This is not necessarily as much rain as you typically see with a hurricane of this strength. We did have some inland bands, and keep in mind when we're talking about flooding, it's not point. This is a good example. We do have a point value here, estimate of around 5 inches right here. But look at here, it's very scattered. It's not filled in. Greenville, much lighter, and then we get down to Kinston, heavier again. To get more significant flooding, we need a widespread type precipitation over entire drainage area, not just these points. Okay, so this week it almost looks like a repeat of last week. We have this upper dip in the jet stream. It's indicated in blue there, and that will bring a cold front through the region. It's in the insert, and behind it, it will be cooler and drier, and ahead of it, it's going to be relatively warm and muggy with scattered showers and thunderstorms. Very similar pattern we saw last week. We had a front go through last week. I would not necessarily say this is a typical summertime pattern. There is a little bit of action going on with these fronts going through. But the fronts are very weak, so as far as precipitation, we're not getting widespread heavy precipitation with these frontal passages. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to end up the week with below normal precipitation over probably more of the nation than above normal. So here's your precipitation forecast. Everything is east. Over the eastern U.S. for the most part, although we do have a wet flow into parts of Arizona. The far west is very dry under that upper ridge, and but the east we do see some fairly modest rainfall, and it's going to be very hard to say exactly where these areas are. Now, this one I think there's a little bit more confidence, but all these other little pockets here, this is very difficult to pinpoint these. So I think the takeaway is there's going to be scattered showers and thunderstorms producing between 1/4 inch and maybe up to an inch, but there will be some pockets of heavier rain around 2 inches or so, but it's very hard to say exactly where those will be. So let's look at any signs of anomalies in temperature or precipitation. This is the current pattern for this week, and like I said, I think that strongest anomaly is over the Midwest. That's green above normal. And then week 2, you just see sort of lighter shades of green, lighter shades of yellow. It's still the tendencies for the upper Midwest to be a little bit wet and the South Gulf to be a little bit dry. Looks like Texas and Oklahoma look like they're going to stay dry. Matter of fact, if we look at this week for Texas and Oklahoma, we see in Texas one of the stronger dry signals. So it looks like after some welcome rain earlier, late spring into the early part of summer, it looks like it's going to be a period of a couple weeks of below normal precipitation. As far as the second week, you can see nothing all that strong. We don't see any strong shades of yellow or strong shades of green for the most part, but I think this pattern of upper Midwest into the Great Lakes region continuing on the wet side, and then the South Gulf area remaining on the dry side looks like the strongest and the highest probability of occurrence. Now here's temperatures. Blue is below normal. Look at this. We're getting into the middle part of summer, into middle part of July, and we're still having these shades of blue, and that means much of the Midwest is going to remain below normal. Now this pattern here, we have this ridge up here, sort of a trough down here, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing warm temperatures as that ridge builds, cool temperatures as that trough, and that's the pattern this week. What about week 2, 11th through 16th? Doesn't change a whole lot. We got this still warm temperatures. It's moderating a bit, as maybe not quite as much, but no sign of strong, hot temperatures over the Midwest right through most likely the end of July. So here your takeaway, I just said, ridge to the west means hot and dry. Dip in the jet stream in the east means cooler. And even though there was a tropical system last week that moved up the east coast, or off the east coast, I should say, I looked right out into the end of the middle range models, and I don't see another system in its path right now. So we'll keep an eye on that, but right now it looks fairly quiet as far as the tropics. Again, I hope you had a great 4th of July weekend, and I will be filling you in again